Right, so you do the first this morning? Right, so it's, well, we accidentally did.
Let's do a question
So
prayer.
we should do
12 weeks. So 12 weeks.
We mucked up last week.
So it should be Manjushri. Because I started with Manjushri last week as well.
Yeah,
So start now. Well,
you started to make it easy.
well, we're going to start with Heart Sutra and then we have a week break and then we can reset.
Yes, yes. Like that, I see what you mean.
You know what I mean?
So it means we start.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
Day to day. Let alone week to week. What are we doing? Heart Sutra. Heart Sutra on the
Heart Sutra?
Yes.
Your wish is my command.
I prostrate that Arya Tripujan, thus the idea at one time. The number one was dwelling on massive vultures mountain in Russia, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called defined perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and he held those five aggregates also as empty and inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, sameness, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance and so on up to including no aging and death, no extinction of aging. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no result of wisdom, no attainment, and also no attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. They pass beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who
dwell
dwell
in the two times also manifest, be completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as true since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Om Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva master, I should train for perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose in that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva master, Arya saying, well said, Samadhi, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you've indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva master, Arya and those surrounding in their entirety and all the world of gods, humans, assurers, and gentiles were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrate in the gathering of the deities and the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like your mother and child. I have some knowledge of peace. Akasana Sajidashanaya Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, Chittaguriya Soha. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. They may be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may they be auspicious of perfect happiness here right now. Sashi Pohoi Chushin Meto Ramri Ravi Nidhi Sanye Shidu Guru Sanje Charan Soke Charan La Chancho Badu Dani Kansuchi Tagi Chushir Dikasona Drola Bencha Sange Drupashu Sanje Charan Soke Charan La Chancho Badu Dani Kansuchi Tagi Chushir Dikasona Drola Bencha Sange Drupashu Sanje Charan Soke Charan La Chancho Badu Dani Kansuchi Tagi Chushir Dikasona Drola Bencha Sange Drupashu Kangi Tsultrim Zone, Tawa Tamji Pambi Chere, Kangi Chunjun, Kodam Shela Chanze. Good morning. Good morning, Geshe. Di nga thana shogi ya mangro nga miji ki thewato chi tangshara jaga nutsu miji nga thewa sena mundu lamden ro chi kari yores dingi chi tichik sho bosra ni justa.
So Victoria is saying that she has no sound. I wonder if other people at home have sound. If you can hear me, then maybe just say yes or no.
I can hear you, Captain.
All right, so maybe Victoria, maybe you have to look at your settings or to switch it on, switch it off. Anyway, Geshe said that this morning someone sent him a message from India. The message was with a question, and Geshe thought that even though it's not specifically related to what we're studying here, still it's a nice question to look at. The question was, how do you make sense of all of it? What is the meaning of all of it?
Lockdown zero. The Chevani Chen and that Dharamsagi Ninkoki Dharme Kiro or Dinji Mambulaya, Kalando, Sole, Mixigi, Adoro Chetu, Chetil Zamala. Kanzerjaya Chiktat Dharme Simjan Tusugi, Kanajura, the Kadu in the Seman Kordi Yudochi, Be and Masovadochi. And Chava down the Aka, and that is a country Degiana, Kala country Ragu and some Betty Magiwacha, Nikum the city.
So, Geshe's friend writing in from India kind of was asking about what's the meaning of all of it, in a sense of what's the purpose in life or in all the different things that we're doing. So she said that we went into a lockdown state, and then she thought of what she could be doing at this point in time, and she decided to take care of those animals, dogs that were left without anyone taking care of them, no owners, no one to feed them. So she decided that she's going to care for them and feed those animals. Then she started to think about the situation more closely, and she said it's not only dogs, actually. When you think of those animals that do not belong to a specific person, and yet they do need to survive. It depends upon being fed and so forth. There's no one to take care of them at the moment. And she started to think about it, and she became completely consumed with those thoughts, to the point in which she said it was even hard to get a good night's sleep in just being so concerned about others.
He's a daddy, the Kanzulaya Kidamis Land Shadow, Chicken, the Yarab Junior, that Tungal Mother, and the Shadow Maras, Yaralia Kidami Mambushus, could kiddy Koran Rodan Rojiki, and in me Chizo Yasalia, too, Cordage, Double Menaya, Deep Yendelaya, Deji, and Kalalama do to Chin Koranso. Dig does means how do the chick any the meeting jiggy kiss any keep to mamma here only did double Yamato any Gombe Yendel Taway, Pemam Uda. You that the Kanji Tilibamam, that the zoo Tolia, Medu Samutan, Kanal Samutan, Shewita. Money consume to not the Tongin. Mazovas Rokido as a the any the dig Mazugo any the Sally Nimako, Namda kidding Nimako, the Chaldos, these are Deliaji, any Nambi Chug Tony, and some countries Tangores. Nalikis teaches.
It's hard sometimes to relate to those issues because the reality of the situation that we face here is different. So we don't have a lot of stray dogs around here, but for those of you that have been to India or lived in India, there are quite a lot of stray dogs in India, those that live around human communities, and they scavenge. Also, you have people that feed them. So in that sense, you can say that both the community of dogs and community of people coexist. So not only that, also in India, it is not uncommon for people to leave dogs, puppies around monasteries. So it might be that your dog becomes pregnant, gives birth to a litter of puppies, and you think that I can't really take care of all those dogs, so I'm just going to leave them by the monastery and someone will take care of them. So as it happens also, you see quite a lot of dogs around monasteries, dogs that don't have an owner, and someone needs to take care of them, someone needs to give them food. So the person, Geshe's acquaintance that sent him a question from India says that when she thinks about it, who's going to take care of them? Who's going to take care of those pets or animals that don't belong to anyone? She says that she finds it really worrying, and the more she thought about it, the more anxious she became, to the point in which she was so anxious that she couldn't even get a good night's sleep.
전주 냠네 오늘 전주 냠네 챙기지는 다 전주샘 마기와 끼와 네버 코네콘도 해야 쳐도 다 로종고도 로종이야게 아니 전주샘 시딘디 아니 저원인지 친구세디 차여로서 저원인지 친구들 다 같이 지그리는 야지 저요가 좀 많이 봐 밴디 아니 동화 담닝 서바세죠 동화 담들이 진짜 music loki batawchi chombaina and di chedu and bezo karchigo chomya and chigi nyambigi and dumbat shaturi sonyoras tinza the didn't too much dochi ngi tanangal chotangi di chig nanshula lojo che and the chitso korang ton chig nanchugi and komshi chigi yormado ngospi jamba yomardeni ko 전주 기비에 전주 생기 자원 인지된 투미 상업으로지 계도 상비게 초진이 이란기에 내려오지 통도 왔어.
So Geshe's acquaintance says that she can't really bear that, and she was wondering, if we draw from the Buddhist tradition, how can we think about it? How can we get a head around that situation from a Buddhist perspective? So we study here Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. And as we said, when we look at the structure of the text, you can fit it around the verse of bodhicitta. May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May that bond have no decline, but increase more and more. So this is what we train you here in Shantideva's Guide, the development of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, which is rooted in loving kindness, or love, compassion. And it's not just a sense of love for others or compassion. It is the one that is involved with being willing to accept upon yourself suffering and hardships and bear it for the sake of others. So whatever hardships you will have to endure in your care for others, you will willingly take it up. This is the type of patience that we develop. So the person that asked Geshe that question hasn't done in-depth Buddhist studies. So the way of engaging with Buddhism is the way that you engage with Buddhism in Tibetan Buddhist society, kind of. So you have this general idea about bodhicitta or compassion, loving kindness, but you haven't really studied it deeply to know how to employ that. So then Geshe says that although the person that asked him hasn't really done studies, still you can see how this question is so relevant to the mind of enlightenment and the basis for the mind of enlightenment, which is love and compassion.
사원이는 만들기지. 먼저 인증이 고해지. 전주 장인지 뭐니 인증이 어떤 기회투가지. 수수기 초도로다 수수 빙빙이라다. 안치 수수기 디기치도. 단디깔이야. 아니치 지속근데 난 된지 자타고 차오니. 아니 수수기 마음이 너무 돌아야 남자치 대마도. 아니 냠타 다음에 든주지려야 샘kur치치니. 아니 샘제칭 빼마서 니뇨로 왔어라. 인자 dediquena some de tan digmar seti zawni wen sam bundas ra when some major. That the Mutun Tangos Lavain, the me passion much simply Nicola Kuya Marta and Carsiva. Some Mutun Tangos Lavana, and each chew with Jamba di and his Shidengi Piglia, Lojonti Yahuchimena, the dear candidate Chagana Samsonich. And Kanjing Maranganalia. Logic sort of chance, Kanjiro, Shogialan Dinion.
So then, having sent that question to Geshe, he said that he had to grapple with that. And when you grapple with this, then sometimes you learn yourself about what would be a good way to look at a situation like that. So when someone asks you a question like that, one way that you can go with that is to say, don't think about it. Just don't think about it. Well, but then we can't really say that, particularly when we look at the subject matter that we're studying at the moment. Actually, we need to think about things like that. It's not that we can say, don't think about it. So we need to think about it. We need to do things for the sake of others. And often we don't really get involved with things that we think that is not our business. So we take care of those that are in our immediate circle of close people, so our friends, family members, parents, kids, or what have you. So we take care of them and we neglect those that we might see, but don't often think about them. Those that are doing quite poorly in a pitiful state, either those that animals or other beings that have no one that takes care of them. So when we think of what we discuss here in this text, and we want that to inform our Buddhist practice, we cannot really say, don't think about them, don't pay attention to them or ignore them. We cannot really say that. So we need to think about it, but then how then do you address that with someone that doesn't have a background of Buddhist education? So no, you cannot say don't think about it, and it's hard to say just think about it all the time. Don't stop thinking about it if someone doesn't have anything to, or not much to draw upon, if they haven't studied the Dharma. So Geshe said that he thought about it in light of that question, and he said that when you grapple with such questions, and you yourself sometimes gets to look at the situation from a different perspective, and thereby expand your mind.
지수 잡는 것보다 노중이 서지는 드는 셰 마세요. 또 스마치 가서 다지 투 아니 신비기 넘버스로 제지 마 배우는데 근데 남가지야 아니 김모식 아니 직소고 제가 뮤사되지 아니 시치 아니 뭐 마차 마치 강가 뭐 칸데 주시 디 아니 자원이네 다지 took learn matu chichi da ani but mananani ani kimoti gita dunghati pautme ba yo si butu stara suchi lambani bush ani shido yo the manji wa sichin da du silkale ani chini ga zurjin ani jak jeling chu ani lenya tabshi chin mi zurne pigile ya ani jeling chu lenga zhongdi ani together bacha ani mi chenchen 직 시원이 아니 단지 기본 매봐 아니 주진 참은 거 되려야 아니 쉬어 같이 시 대디 카르리스 라운디 아니 하르고 아니 주진 참은 거 드리블까야 손놈기 겸마쳐 또 간지 아니 더 도매라는데 손놈기 겸마쳐 이 말이네 도지 아니 만주길이야 도비용데 캐버진 통연다 소바다 장기 따지 아니 자빌라마 아니 상기 꿈을 따투야라 소바 시투야라 소비 갸변이야 sonung solabuchi koyagi lamding su ta tinayza ani ta dindiri larchinta ninji chong tobi ani jizun chamu gombo shargus jetuya logi joros the didn't tumba dojik tonsons.
So it reminded Geshe of the story of Asanga, Arya Sanga, who was said to have cultivated the yoga of Maitreya over 12 years in order to try to come to see him face to face, and still he wasn't able to do that for 12 years. And he became discouraged. And as he was walking along the road one day, being discouraged about his lack of progress in terms of being able to meet Maitreya face to face, he came across a bitch, a female dog that was infested by maggots. The maggots, she was infested by maggots at the lower part of her abdomen, and she was suffering a lot. So Sangha thought that being motivated by compassion, that it has to do something in order to alleviate the suffering that this poor dog was experiencing. And yet he thought that if you try to pull out the maggots from her infested belly, the maggots will be killed. So he leaned down, closed his eyes. He thought that if he were to reach out with his tongue and remove the maggots with his tongue, he would be able to do something for the dog, but also that would not be killing maggots. So he closed his eyes, kneeled down, and as he was trying to reach the belly of that beach, he saw that he cannot really do that. He opened his eyes and he saw Maitreya in front of him. So what this story illustrates is the need for merit as a support, and the accumulation of merit as a support for a certain activity. Particularly, it needs to be supportive of the development of qualities of realizations. So when we think of this story and what this story tells us on a personal level, then we also need to have the support of the accumulation of merit at our disposals. For example, seeing our spiritual teacher as Buddha and so forth, we also need for that an extensive merit. In the same way that you could, and the faith that we have in a spiritual teacher is also something that helps to build up this store of merit. In the same way that in that story of Asanga, the development of compassion was the thing that helped Asanga build up the store of merit so that he was finally able to see Maitreya face to face.
Land of the Ramasons.
So then the question still remains, the original question. So Geshe said that at the end when he thought about it, he thought that what he can say in that situation was, we are used to reciting the verse of refuge in bodhicitta. So do that. Do that as many times as you can. And also you can supplement that with the way of thinking that Shantideva introduced in his 6th chapter of his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. In verse 10, he says, if it can be remedied, why be unhappy? And if it cannot be remedied, what's the use of being unhappy? So for the time being, Geshe said that that's the only thing that came up in his mind. That's the only advice that he could give his friend from India.
교육 건조술이야. 아니 교육을 지야지 생기 거기다 딜을 타가지 아니 소사 접장 지야지 내와서 아니 소사 접장기 갭 교와이는 뜻인지 상담 그거 때문에 아니 인지 저 추투같이 그러 단단 내가 잠을 이미 비교해야지 인지 좀 많이 봐지 개투야기 다 규질이야 조그러 왔어 제
So we go for refuge to the 3 jewels. We develop bodhicitta through the verse of refuge and bodhicitta. And together with that, we continue to build up the accumulations and to purify negativities and obscurations. So if you persist with that, continuously go for refuge, develop bodhicitta, accumulate the collections, purify negativities and obscurations, there's no doubt that you're then building up the development of compassion that will at some point will lead to the generation of uncontrived compassion.
어디다 같이 저디 야구르지도 왔어. 오늘 안 저기다 인지 공고다 참 존중을 로존치 온디 조디 찬주semre 유 조디 인지로 왔어. 인지 미국사기 유 조디 냠타비 심진서로서 비 차단 초리치 아니 지 소소야 제어여 봐도 소소 인인의 점 소소 친구 점만 봐 아니 냠타비 심진을 미국이 인지 기도하나 아니 찬주sem부터 자도 추투거라서 데이터 선보로 저와 이 땅바 인자 야부배 통송스러운 존주장 까바리 안 다른서 미치다 남기 쇼지가 봤어 타니고스 케메 이네야 나 칼라스나 지 믹스 계십스러지 라그문도 안 괜찮아 그가 찬솔았어 이제 어딘지 지소스나
Anyway, Geshe thought it's a good question, so I thought of starting this morning with just introducing this question and the way of thinking about it, because one thing that we can say is that we need to meditate on compassion. We need to meditate on compassion, and after all, particularly when we look at the subject matter of the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, it is the development of bodhicitta, which is based on, or which is caused by compassion. And compassion is developed towards sentient beings that are in a pitiful state. And the development of compassion is done extensively, not just in a partial way to those around us or close to our heart, or not just with respect to oneself, because we are used to thinking primarily of ourselves, but we want to develop compassion that encompasses all those sentient beings that are in a pitiful state. That is the root of bodhicitta. So Geshe's acquaintance from Dharamsala, it's not someone that Geshe speaks with on a regular basis, but she said that she was kind of thinking of this issue. It was bothering her, and she didn't have anyone else to ask, and all of a sudden she thought of Geshe, so she just went for it. She sent him the question.
다들 가서 참들이 있어요. 니버 상기시지기 땅용수 제반세들이
Picture. Yeah.
제반은 상기시지 겹이 겹매도 냠나스 선전 탐지 편집이 상기 장면 대결자 다기랑 니버티 수위조유 마큐토스.
Now, having said that, let's go back to the text and pick up from the point that we left off in the previous session. So, right. We're looking at chapter number 4. We go to the section that explains how to cultivate conscientiousness with regards to the training. We began the section of being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, and we've covered the first point in that section, which comes out of the heading of, if negativities and downfalls are not abandoned, one must continue to take rebirth in the lower realms. Today we're going to pick up from the second point, which is the Buddhas and their children act with equanimity, and there are two verses that this section covers. Let's begin with verse 13. It says, although innumerable Buddhas benefiting all sentient beings have passed, due to my faults, I was not the object of their help.
어디다 다주 디송구요라스다 디 갑두라야 제당게 산지 탐에바 죄다 산지 탐에바 죄심바래 산지 탐에바 죄심바 산지 탐지게 아니 가서 다지 차례다 마수나 심진 된 바식 이제 테마토베기 아니 차례 셴바 지메바로스 심진 된 바식 제발이야 공진 상기바샤다 인자 아직 냠타피 심진 술래지긴 바이나 아니 상기기 아니 가서다 식법 매바직 자니네다 미시바레스 이는야 상기 식법이야 장기 문이 아니 배즈 마치바이나 장기 문이 슈게 마게바이나 가죽 산지기 쓰고여 봐이네요. 산지기 아니 겹투 매버레스. 산지기 수비 쪼유 뒤다. 산지기 겹투 매버레스. 딘자 아니 소수문이 산지기 틀레다. 소수문이 아니 베즈니까 손들 토니 아니 가서 동안에 철거고여 봐디 가서다 무비니 소리스.
So verse 13 says that countless Buddhas have already passed. Right, so although innumerable Buddhas benefiting in beings have passed, they have a reason. And the only thing that they do is their care for sentient beings. That's their only sphere of activity, to care for sentient beings who are in such a pitiful state. So there's not even a single pitiful sentient being that is not beheld by Buddha, that is not seen by Buddha. And yet, without putting an effort, without working hard, sentient beings cannot be protected by Buddhas. So we need, for being protected by a Buddha, we need to have two factors that come together. One of them is the enlightened activities of Buddhas, but also sentient beings from their side need to make effort. Without these two coming together, they cannot be liberated from suffering.
딘자다 아주 가드이네요. 나조래야 가서 다지 제투야기 아니 고급이야 봤다. 누가야 봤 태야기 고급 딥에 뉴로스. 뉴로스. 이네 다지 고급 여비 갑들이야 고급 당진지지 고급 당진지 고급 여버도 문진 집이 톤 배조 마치 봐나 다 원이게 아니 가서다 방부 슈치 경 슈치 자그연자 지 피게야 캡템보 산지 응문이 자원인 회와 매바이네야 아니 소수 응문이 아니 투셔 쇼바는 다디 쇼지 폼보로 왔어. 디 소로지 차와나 배 폼보로 왔어. 산지기 직 수비 주유도 많기 와디 아니 소수 응문이 만지고 돈 차려야 마도 아니 산지 응문이 일이여 라서 딘지제면 왔어. 딘자다 라셔 쪼디 만절이야 고급여 비캅들이야 추 자야기 투주여봐 추 원트봐 안지 장도 여비 캅들이야 슈게 고야 nenga tsudi tengyo sares right.
So we can do something about it. We have the ability to do that. We have encountered the opportunity to do that. And this opportunity does not come by so easily. It's actually quite rare. It's quite difficult to find such an opportunity when we can do something about our situation. And without seizing that opportunity, without identifying what it is, without doing something about it, it would be such a great loss. Even if Buddhas are non-deceptive, even if they are unfailing, still, if we do not do anything about it, that would be a great loss. So from our side, we need to do something about it. Buddhas are not partial. It's not that they have a sense of closeness or holding some as close and others distant, and therefore in certain situations they would not be helping out those that are far away from them. Buddhists do not act in this way. They are impartial. And unless we do something about our situation once we have met the Dhamma, and we have those that introduce the Dhamma to us, we can study. If we don't work hard in order to do that, that would be a great sense of loss. So what we need to do once we have met the Dhamma, once we have that introduction, is to make effort, to exert ourselves in developing an understanding through studying the Dhamma.
And the and tenda kiche di and payu roshawaina sosu nebaros rang nebare mado and sangi chilelaya kasota nigomebatan and chilaya nigomebatan so in maravas is a rangi nebe wangi and sangi chuyu makiwachik chabaris.
In that sense, the essence of our life is to correct the mind, to fix our mind, to train our mind, to make improvements. Often we get our priorities in a way that is completely skewed. We emphasize something that is of lesser importance, and the things that are really important, those that are of greater priority, are completely forgotten, they're left out. And if we continue to just emphasize the things that are not that important and forget the things that are of greater priority, for that long, we will stay behind. So it's not that the Buddha's enlightened activities have no power. It's not that the Dhamma has no potential. It is mostly that we get our priorities in a way that is completely skewed, so that we don't make much progress, so we feel that we are being completely left behind. Looking at the commentary to this verse, it says, one may think, I shall be all right because the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will rescue me. Innumerable Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who have worked for the benefit of all sentient beings have passed already. But due to one's own fault of degenerating bodhicitta and the trainings, one did not become the object of their care. Okay. In order to emphasize this point, Geshe in his commentary draws from Maitreya's ornament for clear realization, which says, although the king of gods shall reign, etc., which is a reference to the harvest of the enlightened activities of the king of the gods, the Buddhas. Although their enlightened activities are ensuing or forever ensuing, in order to attain that state, you need the complete set of cause and conditions to be present. Without cultivating a complete set of cause and conditions, if you create only partial conditions, you will not reach that state.
치 껴비 껴매도 냐스 다 난주 삼는 딘디 로즈라스 다 제레 치고 제레 용구리 상상도 치 딘디 캔냥 상상 땅데 반다 용연 자원이 요 말이 순거.
So then when we move on to the next verse, it begins with a question. One may then think, I will be all right because they will rescue me later. Right? So rather than saying that it's posing a question, then Geshe Dhammarenchen points out one way of thinking. It will still be all right. I will still be all right because they will rescue me later. We ought not to think about it in this way.
다동 대신 다체나 니만한 신신데나 양다 대신 다랑 균투는 조그라스 나로 내던 치원다 제단 시소 용원규.
It says in the next verse, if I continue to act like this, it will be the same again and again. I will experience sickness, bondage, being cut and mutilated in the lower realms.
제베 나노네 다동 칼기 대신도 밤에봐 다 소스체나 양다 양도 수유주 민결스 동할 규만 용거바 대신데 난도 네거바탄스 난도 네거바탄 덴도 케자 네단 치원단 야나 난도 네소 칼라 제바탄 류셰바소 동안 타이바 용교로스.
The commentary says, if I continue to act recklessly, I should not become the object of the cure and will have to experience suffering continuously. I will have to take rebirth in the lower realms, and even if I take rebirth in the happy realms, I will have sickness and lack of freedom. Either that or I will have sickness in the lower realms and experience innumerable sufferings there, such as my arms and legs being cut off and my body being lacerated.
Sumba Tanjun ni kawala nis. Sumba Tanjun ni kawala ni. Tanda machinata ani chisu yungu mares. Chisu da tanda nashingi da chik. Tayin juju tsari gudin tobiyagi. Di pe masiga kago. Kansina di tayin juju tsari gudin di tagaski gyumi kemi toni yungu mewa di chir ngubi chunyeros. Tinza ku gyugenji tonu yongwa gyugen tiya ku tupi gyugenji tonu yongwa maso mintubi gyujela teni yongmasi wanza tupi gyu ani gewi ani gewi tsomambo baya teni drogo wanza ani nganju semla ya takje chebaina nimachi la ya ani gewa khaju sagdu tipa khaju sagdu tu chidurbaina peshi jaja gechu guchu jaja chuji ani gewa drogo yana ya we must be yabor de kabure dos man sem man yachi ani chadam mosum digi ani rosu de song chik tam bai no ngan geo dre ko we must be yunu dos ra.
Looking at the next section in the text, we're going to cover point C in the section of being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings. And the section speaks of the difficulty of obtaining human life of leisure and endowments. There are 2 points in that section. If bodhicitta deteriorates, it becomes difficult to obtain leisure and endowments that possesses the 4 wheels conditions that facilitates practice. And even though they have been obtained, one should make effort because they quickly perish. So freedoms and opportunities are so hard to find. It's not that we find freedoms and opportunities just randomly without causes and conditions. They depend upon causes and conditions, and even more so, they depend upon compatible causes and conditions. This is the general nature of such compounded phenomena that depend upon causes and conditions. So if they depend upon compatible causes and conditions, what it means is that to obtain freedoms and opportunities, that there is a collection of many virtues that are compatible with freedoms and opportunities. That collection needs to be created for the result to arise. So that being the case, let's evaluate our current situation. Looking at, for example, a passing day and trying to get an estimate of how many virtuous actions do we do and how many negative actions do we perform. When we examine a passing day, we can see how there is a predominance to negativities and virtues are so meager. If we have a day in which, let's say, 10% of the things that we do are virtues, then it's good, but it's also hard, isn't it? We need to make effort in order to even get to that. Most of the day, we are governed by afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and ignorance, under the power of which we end up behaving negatively.
아니 니가와 니 잔주 셈냠나 게 단주 니가와 인자 단주 니가와 인자 아니 첸들이야지 잔주 셈데 아니 템부지 주마토 잔주 셈 냠바이나 아니 겨 치만 남수 아니 잔주 셈 냠바 할수 제디 카고쇼 제 투야 미바 예메디 아니 차마도와 요 단디난신 기직 아니 땡산 캬버지 아니 잔주 셈이야 냠니 제 투야 미바 예비 땡지 네 게 투야 카고쇼 차간자 카고레스.
So as we said, looking at the outline, the first point says that if bodhicitta deteriorates, it becomes difficult to obtain leisures and endowments that possess the four wills, conditions that facilitate practice. If bodhicitta deteriorates in this life, how hard will it be to get a good state in future lifetimes? It will be very difficult to get such an opportunity again in the future.
Tere chanju sem nyamna ki koloshita dimbi tanju topkawa tans. Toba yang nyudun jigbale. Nyudun jigbe bebar chawas.
So that was the first point. Then the second point in the outline is, even though they have been obtained, one should make effort because they quickly perish.
Tambu chanju sem nyamna ken koloshida dimbi tanju topkawa ni tuichi tanju tobanna be nyamnas ra dandi kawlaya susu tanji joju sami within to the kabdelaya pameki wangi leyan chini ta mahubala yangi chekun nyamna tadi susu le tan gogor tan keje chire ma di tsawni tan digyo mar sungorda teje shaban jawata teda mudu tabata gego teda kon namshu tabanjus kadu yungres ra.
Beginning with the first point, if bodhicitta degenerates, the freedom and endowments with the conditions of four wills are difficult to find. So you might become too unconscientious about your situation, too relaxed about your situation. And if you behave in that way, you would be deceiving yourself. So one may think, I will make an effort when I attain the freedoms and endowments later on. In that way, you become too relaxed about your situation. To answer that, verse 15 says, the coming of a Tathagata, faith in the attainment of a human body, this making it possible to meditate on virtue. Since they are rare, when will they be attained?
Lost what you said that. Udum wari metotar jigden du tejin shebon jonda dendo sumla so sangi gi tembala tebata mulu tobata topgen yu us yebata ombo samanda negi tamalo bala sobi gewa kombi tendruma tanjurdan jenjurdan demba teta wengiwa konas semniler sobi tanjur namshi toban göti semnidi chanjur semnidir var tanjur namshi toban göti niye kabe sos.
Let's look at the commentary to verse 15. So after this statement, one may think I will make an effort when I attain the freedoms and endowments later on. The text says to have attained the 5 personal endowments and the 5 circumstantial endowments that make it possible to meditate on virtue. It is as rare as the Udumbara flower. These are, amongst others, a Tathagata has descended. One has faith in the 3 baskets of the Buddha's teachings. One has also attained a human body. One has been reborn in a central country. One has complete faculties. One has not transgressed the border of karma. It is so rare then to have attained a precious human rebirth when one trains in the 2 minds of enlightenment, is even rarer.
이봐 무슨 되게 토바연 유든지 멤버 차원이스 토바연 단단한 토야디야 토비어버디야 지 다지 산이지고 둘다지마지고 나와지마지고 로지마지고 로카시지는 이 지고 성성디 아니 레로레스 아니 레로 라 간지 소소소소래야 고고탄야비 아니 상로지레스 디 디레스 디 샤원드 드바이나 아니 사사지를 사도를 세웠다 하지나 먼저 토비 땐들이야 아니 이게 자원이요 말이스 직하고 쇼지레스 아니 가든 직다 가주스보다 네트마도기 아니 땡큐 자원이 네인자 데리라니 단다라니 베 아니 소좀 배워치니 드버샤와이나 따디 야슈레스 로
The next point says, even though they have been obtained, one should make effort because they quickly perish. So one should not fall prey to laziness of procrastination. So we think, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next month, and so forth. So this way of thinking is called laziness, which is a great sense of self-deception, because this body that we have now, this physical support, is not something that we can rely upon. It disintegrates from moment to moment, and we have no idea when it will come to an end. And following that, we will go on and take another rebirth, which is currently not predictable. So therefore, one should not fall prey to that sense of procrastination, because the body perishes. It disintegrates from moment to moment.
저들이 오늘 와서 배나 난줄로 좀 컨데스 지기가 있네요. 안 로총 갑들이야 마치나 배나 끼도지 장고 있네요. 로야스레스디 배마서 갈카고 찾도스. 고 장시기 비 범센다 맞은 이 자위기 배나 돈로질 라바이나야 배나 샤 아원에서 따오네 라바이나야 그때 신고라 딘디지기 렌하고 디 간주 로야스레나 갈카고 배도스 자 딜리 띵스가 자치비기 아니 로종 찬주세나야 로종 때다 텔리짱 아니 수수기 배 류셈니가 배달 갑두나야 네버요비 갑두나야 장토나 텔레파비기 펜도요바지 싱그리모도 류셈니가 곱사비 제라야 다직 잠바이네 야푸다리 개워치만이야 고케요 야푸르데니야 대zam기 사취여바지다 팬도여바지 네버드 댐바지 장투에 백합으로 왔어.
It's particularly relevant to us because though we can study and we do study, still we can see how much more effective we can be in our studies when we start doing it at a young age. The older you get, the harder it becomes, in a sense that when you think of, for example, learning a new language, now if you start earlier when you're young, it's easier than when you get old or older. We're using a certain basis, a certain foundation for our study. And you can say that it's not only us that we can study. You can also teach a new language, or a few words to a parrot. But even a parrot can learn how to say different words. But still, if you want to be more proficient in learning a language, then you need to use this physical support that you have, and even more so when we consider what we study here, which is mind training. In order to study and train in this tradition of mind training, you need the leisure that is afforded by this body that we have now with a combination of mind, with a combination of body and mind. And if you have the leisure that is afforded by this combination of body and mind, then you can extract its benefit. If you procrastinate and you think that I'll do it later on, then although we can say that it still gives you some benefits in terms of future lifetimes, still you make it really difficult for you to extract the most, to make the most out of it in this lifetime.
These are jealousy instead. So Nyanga Shujigamia, Suzuki Chawayakshu, the Nyangajigan Gajan Chomadas, Jela Karcham Karako, Manzura, Tandanganzu Tambuya, Gondanganzu Kandra Chabra, Kara, Sani Kandra Chayu Karako, and Lojema and Kaki Mutum in Chabra Karako. These are the Tandani Chegoedi and the Kogoris, Nangaris.
This way of thinking in which we think that I'll do it later on, I can still do it later on, is dangerous. It is dangerous because we know that even if we think that, no, I'm not going to do it now, I'm going to do it in the evening, we have no idea whether we're going to be alive or get to the evening. We have no idea whether we'll be able to do it tomorrow or next year and so forth. Although we tend to procrastinate, how can we know if we will actually get to the point where we will do it? So we know what's going to happen to us in our next lifetime if we're going to end up in a miserable state of existence, being tormented by suffering. So therefore, one should not procrastinate thinking that I can still do it later on, but should start working straight from now. So let's look at verse 16. A day like this without sickness, although there is food and no harm, life is deceptive on a momentary basis. The body is a one-time loan.
And long years said, the Egypt ancients, to some wrong mares, jelly some wrong mares, long year chamarunde, Gayen ne me is been Nima than Travis, Niman did our Chevon, Yana ne maybe Nimati, Tun did our Twingin set on Geshe, Gayen 7 Mekan, Ni Seni, Kitchigam Medeva, you the GPS. So what the Lu de Tan Chikzamgi and Nevoshan the Ram maybe long year Michawa, Tadanin in Bever Chavos.
So we have to think that we have time, and this is what this verse is talking about. One may think this body I have currently attained has no obstructing conditions against it, and it is endowed with conducive conditions. Hence, I shall practice later. It is thinking that we still have time. One should not act as if one has leisure. A human body without the obstructing condition of sickness is like a day in the context of saying a day like this. But a day like this without sickness, without the obstructing conditions of harm, and with the conducive conditions of food and so forth is deceptive. Life does not abide even for one moment and disintegrates quickly. This body is only a one-time loan and one has no power over it. Therefore, do not act as if there is time and make an effort.
Teri da shiva ngandru ki na gewa dribi ka meba nis, ta ngandru ki tsasuni zin tsatsawa rochi chago ras inza meba lo sum. Ngandru ki na gewa dribi ka meba tang, dendru tubi tsi mambe na ngandru langdu lo mumbo gewa tang. Ngandru li shin tawa kawo, tambu ngandru ki na gewa dribi ka meba ni, tangju ikten gyumar tubi ti tusu dribi choni me loncha maronti, dagi choban dendri ni mili tobjen. The
next point in being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings is there is no opportunity to practice virtue if one has taken rebirth in the lower realms. So if we proceed to the lower realms from the point of death in this life, that will be the end of us. There are 3 points in that section. There is no opportunity to practice virtue if one is reborn in the lower realms. If one does not make effort when one has obtained higher rebirth, once one is in the lower realms, one will be ignorant with respect to what is to be abandoned and what is to be cultivated. The third point is it is extremely difficult to be liberated from the lower realms once one has taken rebirth there. Now, so then looking at verse 17, it begins with saying, it is unsuitable to relax thinking, I will attain a succession of precious human rebirths, so I will practice later on. Verse 17 says, with behavior like this, I will not even attain a human body. If I do not attain a human body, there will be only negativity and non-virtue, and not virtue, sorry.
As man chedi chagdan monsu won't chode modo ani givi sem won't chode be cover those nothing underway. The dindrich modo mebaina ani kyo chimalaya tajin josam within pashani ani mulut some tovetia dendro some kiatia be maso kavu ro gumasan debion menza be cover those ro.
When this verse says, with behavior like this, I will not even attain a human body, we can think about it in terms of what's happening to us on a mental level, because our mind is not hidden to us, right? It's not that our state of mind is something that is hidden to us. We know what's happening to us in our mind, and we can feel how pitiful it is that a mind falls under the sway primarily of anger, attachment, and ignorance, those disturbing states, those afflictive states of mind. It is so hard to generate a virtuous mind. We know that because a mind is not hidden to us. And if that is the case, let alone obtaining human rebirth with freedoms and opportunities, how hard would it be just to obtain a mere human rebirth, a mere rebirth in a happy state of existence?
till the me lu materna the and Lucian land road that Tundra Dojik and that Dusan Chinata and Yavaname said, Kia Ninga Pioras, Timagina, Tundru Luta Lamina, the Nanjing in Collegium, and Churchill to the Chitevan. And Dipon Bashimago, Chigame Pesseurendus, Shoki ni Namseva the Yonchin, and Kanjit. 소소 또 저거강 미쳤더니 아니 투투기 지금 무슨 간다지는 참으로 아니 사대야를 좀 맞다고 세대야를 좀 맞다고 아니 내가지 없는 거스 진짜 대본 바식 세대 차기도 왔어요.
So what will happen to us if we are not born as human beings? Well, if we are not born as human beings, then we might be born as an animal. Or we might go even more extreme of the worst states of rebirth that we can take in the hellish states of existence is the unrelenting hell. So how would it be like for us to be born in those states of existence? Thinking about, for example, being born as an animal. Look at birds, right? We are surrounded in this environment by birds. And when we look at the daily procedures, it seems that the only things that they engage with are negative actions. So they rise up in the morning, and it seems that most of the day they are consumed with getting food, and the food that they have is coming at the expense of others, killing insects, feeding on insects, and so forth.
Ngarkiendu chigchilaya chig ani jansen sort of do asra another dizo rojichin bedewana and me lambi and pyongo zauni the machu suzu me ludenti tolaya chig never yashi turn to yagi champagne drip to yagi in liver chigioras that dip matobana that tono the chigpa ra karma kar pigilaya chig min kartanare dulo karkanare Samlo Nalaya, gender sort of that Chichilaya, any Maga Chidea sort of Chichilaya, Tonjo Chidea sort of Chavina, any Chochiamundas, or Chochiamundas.
But not only that, we can see the way that they behave when we look at animal behavior and see that they also have afflictive states of mind, anger and attachment, pride and sense of competitiveness. Not only them, but when we look at our mind, we can recognize this just as well. We also have those states of mind. So in that sense, are we so different to them? If we make no effort in developing a mind, we will be just like them. But we have an ability in this life to develop our mind. Like, for example, we have an ability to develop an altruistic intention, to wish to be of benefit to others. So if we don't use the opportunity or the ability that we have in this life, there will be no difference between ourselves and them. If we get involved in the pursuit after having a good name, a good reputation, after food or clothing and so forth, if we get involved with states such as disliking others, looking down on others and so forth, how pitiful would that be? So the commentary says, someone like myself, though, through actions that create negativity and no virtue, will not even attain a human body in the next life. If I take rebirth in the lower realms, I will only generate non-virtue and not the slightest amount of virtue. And it will be difficult to be reborn again in the happy realms.
Kanya be leaning number Mishi be that Kiawaj Lambinas, then Chita Kaim major chagre sugata denru tebitse mambe no nandu lando la mambo giwani kanzi gechi kade ya gewa daki machina nganson tunga ko mumba teze daki chichayus.
Sorry. Let's look at the next point, which is stating that if one does not make the effort when one has obtained a higher rebirth, once one is in the lower realms, one will be ignorant with regards to what is to be abandoned and what is to be cultivated. So if we do end up in a miserable state of existence, we will lack the ability to discriminate, to discern between what is right and what is wrong, what is to be taken up and what is to be cast aside. In relation to that, the next verse says, if although having the fortune to practice virtue, I do not create virtue, then what am I going to do when completely confused by the lower realms suffering? Can Joe di Lotzen?
Kanzi gewa chibi gewa da denya tu ti tse gewa da gimbebi tribal machina nazon de kini tu gyuntu tsowa dungan ki tonshin landur nela kundu momba ti tse dagi gewa chiche ye chonse ge munibi tanjur tubi dündür beba chawos.
The commentary to this verse says, if, although having the fortune to practice virtue, I do not make an effort now to practice virtue, then how am I going to practice when I'm in the lower realms? At that time, I'm miserable because of continuously experiencing the feeling of suffering of the lower realms, and I'm confused concerning what has to be practiced and what has to be abandoned. As a result, I cannot practice anything. Hence, I need to make an effort now to achieve again the precious human rebirth. All right, let's leave it here. Animadu. So thank you very much. Also, the nuns apparently had a meeting this weekend or yesterday? Yesterday. So Geshe heard that it went very well. Thank you very much for that. There was a certain resolution also to do with Madhu. What was the resolution?
Madhu offered to clean the gompa.
All right.
Yeah.
So Madhu is offered to clean the gompa. Thank you very much, Madhu. Yeah. Thank you very much. Nah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So let's put the dedication on the board and on the screen. Nyududa lama sangye dugene doa chika malupa tri salagopa shu chanchu sencho rupoche makye pana kye panyam pame payam gole gondu pewa shu kowe shikanti tendon dewa madu juwe shebe sewan tenzi gyatoi shape site patu tengur Jachin Jango Yahweh, Tenzi Yahweh, Kunso Topose, Shosun Kowe Le Montuju, Mata Sotuji, Kotu Shaten.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Katzen.
Geshe, thank you, Katzen. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah, people of Animal. Oh, Animal, right. Yeah, no, I thought you said Animal, but I was thinking that's procrastination. You said, do not procrastinate.